Welcome back to the channel, everybody. My name is Phil, and this is my lovely co-host, Samantha.
Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back.
We have World War I, 1916. We've done
Part 3.
Yeah, we've done part 1 and 2, which was 1914, 1915. We're going year by year so far.
Yeah.
And we're entering into 1916. It has been mind-blowing thus far.
Yeah, really informative.
Really informative, seeing all the engineering that took place. Unfortunately, all the lives lost that have taken place already in such a short period of time, the escalation across the world. And this was truly a world war, seeing how much was going on all around the globe. So I've been really blown away by this series so far. I'm excited to check out part 3. You as well?
I am as well.
All right, let's get going into 1916.
World War I was supposed to have been a short and glorious war. But by 1916, a new kind of industrialized warfare had seen the death toll soar into the millions, with no end in sight. Naval blockades were beginning to cause shortages of food and fuel across Europe, while thousands of women had entered the workforce, replacing the men sent to fight in their millions. All sides were preparing for a long war. The war has raged for a year and a half as the Allies continue to battle the Central Powers, recently joined by Bulgaria. At sea, the British maintain their naval blockade of Germany, preventing the import of food and other vital raw materials. Germany has retaliated with a U-boat blockade of Britain, but has to limit its attacks to avoid provoking the neutral USA, whose citizens have already been caught in the crossfire. On the Western Front, French, British and Belgian troops are dug in opposite the Germans. Both sides trapped in the bloody stalemate of trench warfare. On the Eastern Front, the Russians have ended their long retreat and stabilized the line, but their army has suffered huge losses. On the Italian front, Italian troops have launched a series of costly, unsuccessful attacks against strong Austro-Hungarian defenses. While on the Balkan front, the Central Powers have overrun Serbia, whose army is forced to make a bitter retreat through the Albanian mountains. Now, on the 5th of January, Austro-Hungarian troops attack Montenegro. They are delayed at the Battle of Mojkovac, but 3 weeks later, Montenegro is forced to surrender. On the Caucasus front, the Russians launch a surprise winter offensive against Ottoman Turkish forces. 6 weeks later, Russian troops occupy the city of Erzurum. In April, they capture the Black Sea port of Trebizond. Meanwhile, the British transport 2 motorboats to Lake Tanganyika in Africa. They finally arrive after a 10,000-mile trip by sea and land.
Wow.
And help the British seize control of the strategic lake from local German forces. The same month, in German Cameroon, German troops besieged on Mora Mountain for 18 months finally surrender to the Allies. It marks the end of the Cameroon campaign.
There's still aspects of the World War again, like going down in Africa, where I don't even know how that came to be, like how Germany had control of certain areas
In Africa?
in
I have
Africa,
no idea.
and how, the colonization process took place before this came to be. But, it's wild that you just had a 10,000, what do they say, mile?
Yeah, trek, like by the sea and land.
Yeah, just to get into this war zone.
Yeah.
That's like
to defend
attrition.
the lake, which is wild.
They started this off by saying attrition, like literally, you
Yeah.
have to be like in it for the long haul
Yeah.
for some of these wars.
I
and
can't
these
even
battles.
imagine how do they say 18 months it took or something?
from the beginning to where they just finished with winning that battle. It's not even the war. It's just one single battle within the greater war, which is crazy.
On the Western Front, the Germans unleash a devastating assault on the French fortress town of Verdun. German General Erich von Falkenhayn knows France will defend this symbolic town to the last man. His plan, in his own words, is to bleed France white in its defense. It is the strategy of attrition. Verdun becomes one of the most terrifying battles of the war, a mincing machine, where infantry divisions are destroyed almost as fast as they can be fed into the line.
Brutal.
In Britain, 1 million men have already volunteered for military service. But the government realizes it won't be enough. Britain becomes the last major power to introduce conscription. That spring, on the Western Front, British troops are the last to be issued with steel helmets. The nature of trench warfare produces a high proportion of head wounds. The German Stahlhelm, the French Adrian helmet, and the British Mark I steel helmet offer limited protection from shell splinters and shrapnel. Neutral Portugal has been cooperating with the British, which seems to offer the best chance of holding on to her African colony, Portuguese Angola. On the 9th of March, Germany retaliates by declaring war on Portugal. On the Eastern Front, Russia launches an attack near Lake Narok to relieve pressure on the French at Verdun, but it's a disaster. There are 100,000 Russian casualties, and the attack fails to divert any German troops from the fighting at Verdun. In Dublin, Irish Republicans launch an armed revolt against British rule. It becomes known as the Easter Rising, and is put down after 6 days of street fighting. In the Middle East, after a 5-month siege, British forces at Kut surrender. General Townsend leads 9,000 British and Indian soldiers into captivity. About half later die from starvation or disease. Britain wants Arab support in its fight against the Ottoman Empire, so it's promised Arab leaders an independent Arab state after the war. But now, Britain and France secretly sign the Sykes-Picot Agreement, planning after the war to divide the Middle East into British and French zones of control. Unaware of this deal, Hussein bin Ali, Sharif of Mecca, leads the Arabs in revolt against Turkish Ottoman rule. In the Battle of Mecca, his forces seize control of the Holy City. On the Italian front, Austro-Hungarian forces launch a surprise attack at Asiago. Italian defences give way. Austro-Hungarian troops are poised to break through into northern Italy. That month in the North Sea, the German High Seas Fleet clashes with the British Grand Fleet at the Battle of Jutland. In the only major naval battle of the war, the British suffer heavier losses, but claim victory as the German fleet withdraws and does not re-emerge from its base for the rest of the war.
It's just so mind-blowing to me to see how many war battles are going on all at the same time.
Like simultaneously?
Yeah, it's like full-fledged. We're into the war at this point, right? Like all over the place, whether you're in Middle East, you're in Africa, you're in Europe, it's all, on the Russian border, everything's going on.
Yeah, and I think, this is just going to sound so naive, but, I never really knew, how far widespread it was. I feel like from what we were taught, it was, obviously later Canada and the U.S. come in, but Canada, U.S., and, Europe.
Yeah.
And, a little bit of Russia.
Yeah.
I never knew it spread into Africa, the Middle East, any of that.
They just introduced the Arabs that
That's
were
what I mean.
taking part in it now.
I had no clue Arabs were ever even involved in it.
Yeah. And, I didn't even know that the Turkish Ottoman Empire was so huge.
Yeah.
right? And like you look at the way the map looks today, and it's just not even close to that. And even like the British and French colonies and all that kind of stuff, right? I had heard about these things, right? But like it seems like it's more dated history.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like it's so recent of 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how much the world has changed in light of that. But yeah, so many things going on at one time, and
It's like overwhelming.
yeah, it's just really mind-blowing to know the world was in that much chaos all together.
Yeah, and it also seems like the U.S. like was kind of like, we're not getting involved in this for like a long time.
As well, yeah, I mean, they probably stay out of it until they basically can't any further, right? That tends to be the case. And what happens is, people absolve themselves until they're forced into the war, and then it's like, okay, we're going to take part in it now. So just really, really crazy. I mean, the amount of information in these videos is outstanding.
I know.
For the summer of 1916, the Allies have planned major simultaneous offensives against the Central Powers, from east and west. Now they are needed more than ever to relieve pressure on the French at Verdun and the Italians at Asiago. The Russians launched their attack first. On the Eastern Front, General Alexei Brussilov has carefully maintained the element of surprise. His troops break through the enemy lines, in some places advancing 60 miles and taking 200,000 prisoners. This brilliant, though costly, Russian attack achieves its aim, as the Central Powers are forced to redeploy troops from other fronts to shore up the line. At sea, British cruiser HMS Hampshire, en route to Russia, hits a mine and sinks off Orkney. Among the 650 dead is Britain's iconic Secretary of State for War, Lord Kitchener. 3 days later in the Adriatic, Italian troopship Principe Umberto is sunk by a German submarine. It's the deadliest sinking of the war, with 1,900 lives lost. On the Western Front, Britain and France launched their major summer offensive, the Battle of the Somme. Hopes are high for a breakthrough, but the first day is a disaster. A long Allied artillery bombardment fails to knock out German defences, and waves of British infantry are cut down by machine gun fire as they advance into no man's land. In the space of a few hours, the British suffer 57,000 casualties, a third of them killed. It's the worst day in the history of the British Army.
I'd say so.
But more attacks are ordered, and the battle will rage for another 5 months.
Let's just bring on somebody else.
Encouraged by the Russian advance, Romania joins the Allies. But despite an initially successful advance into Transylvania, Romania quickly faces a counter-offensive from German, Bulgarian and Austro-Hungarian forces. The Allied force at Salonika tries to support Romania by launching their own offensive towards Monastir. With Serbian troops in the lead, there are small gains, but dogged Bulgarian resistance prevents a breakthrough. On the Western Front, General von Falkenhayn finally calls off the attack at Verdun. The French army has honoured their commander General Nivelle's promise. Ils ne passeront pas. They shall not pass. But victory comes at a terrible price. 365,000 casualties. The Germans lose almost as many.
Oh my God.
Verdun remains one of the bloodiest battles in human history.
That's terrible.
For his defeat at Verdun, Falkenhayn is sacked, and Germany's heroes of the Eastern Front, von Hindenburg and Ludendorff, take command in the west. Meanwhile, the Battle of the Somme continues. Near the village of Flers, the British introduce a new weapon they hope can break the deadlock of the trenches. It is called the tank. But despite some small successes, the first tanks are too few in number and too prone to mechanical failure to make any real impact. On the Eastern Front, Russia's Brussilov offensive comes to an end. Casualty estimates vary wildly, but it's clear both sides have suffered catastrophic losses. Neither the Russian nor the Austro-Hungarian army ever fully recovers.
That's unbelievable.
On the Italian front, heavy fighting rages throughout the autumn, as Italian forces make repeated, costly assaults against Austro-Hungarian positions along the Isonzo River. The Battle of the Somme comes to an end amid autumn rain and mud. The Allies have advanced 10 miles at the cost of 600,000 casualties. German losses are about 450,000. The Allies reassure themselves that this is a winning strategy, because at this rate, Germany will run out of men first. Meanwhile, disaster engulfs.
We'll run out of men first. Like, we'll just kill each other until we can't kill each other any further. That's literally the strategy.
I was just thinking to myself before they said that, like, where are they getting all these people from?
Well, that's what they said.
like,
they
just-
inscribed them and they drafted them, basically. So they had to go
There's
into
been,
the war.
At this point, like millions and millions and millions of lives lost. So it's like,
Yeah.
how is there that many men that you can conscript to go to war? Like, at some point, you're going to run out.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's what is, I guess, so terrible about this whole war is like you just keep going and keep going and keep going. You know, it's like it doesn't matter what the cost is going to be, how many lives are lost. We're just going to keep pressing until somebody quits. That's what ends up being so costly, right? Is you just keep going at whatever cost.
Yeah, and then at one point they said that, I forget who it was, but somebody on the Allies had taken in 200,000 prisoners from winning about. What do you do with 200,000 people?
Yeah.
Where are you putting 200,000 people?
Well, in a camp somewhere in the middle of nowhere, probably, right? And it's also crazy just to think, like, we saw at one part here how Russia had made some in-ground on the land there. I think that was actually the point that you were referring to. And that allowed them to make progress in, I think it was Verdun. And so that's 2 times now we've seen Russia play a really, really important role in World War II and now in World War I, where them making ground against those forces allowed other components to take place.
advance.
You know, there was domino effects from it, and it's just crazy to think where we are today
Yeah,
with
like
not
so
being
opposed
allied with
to
Russia,
Russia.
right? And how important of a role they played in both those conflicts, and you know, in general, it's just. It's crazy how we just keep adding countries. Like we haven't even got to the U.S. yet.
I
We
know.
just saw Romania added into the mix, right?
Yep.
And it's literally like the whole world. It's just blowing my mind.
Yeah.
It's like,
At this point, there's like very few areas that are not involved.
yeah. And then we also saw the introduction of the tank as well.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Like the
we
very
talked
first
about
tank. Like,
some of the engineering
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
And so the tank being introduced for the first time in World War I, significant, obviously, because that was a huge portion of World War II.
yeah, well, and think about where they are now today with tanks, like
Yeah.
how advanced they are.
Oh, yeah, it's night and day difference. But anyways, I guess we'll finish it up. Another 2 minutes here.
Winning strategy, because at this rate, Germany will run out of men first. Meanwhile, disaster engulfs Romania as the country is overrun by the Central Powers. Romanian forces suffer 250,000 casualties. The remnants of its army take position alongside the Russians on the Eastern Front. That winter, Franz Joseph, Emperor of Austria since 1848, dies. He is succeeded by his son, Karl. In Britain, Prime Minister Herbert Asquith is forced from office and succeeded by David Lloyd George, while General Joffre is replaced as French Commander-in-Chief by General Nivelle, who promises victory through bold, aggressive action. Amid the comings and goings, US President Woodrow Wilson's attempts to mediate a peace settlement come to nothing. Neither side is willing to make concessions. Epic History TV relies on the support of fellow history lovers. So if you like what we do, please consider pledging anything from $1 per video at the channel's Patreon page.
So the other thing that's, pretty wild is the communication that needs to take place through all of these different countries, because we just said how Russia, was very influential in what they were trying to do to take some of the pressure off of other countries. And, I assume they must have been communicating with some of those other countries to say, okay, we're going to do this at this time and we're going to implement this tactic and blah, 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 blah. So you have to have covert communications for one. You can't let the enemy know what you're discussing. So you have to keep them under wraps. And then you got to be communicating with so many different countries that are involved. So that's pretty wild.
Well, I think too, at this point in time, obviously the modes of communication were also very limited. So that's probably what also contributed to the war being even long, obviously it needed to be long because so many things happened, but it was probably even longer because of the time it took in between different things happening, because to get communications to people would take 10 times longer. You couldn't just text somebody and be like, hey, we're going to this spot. You know what I mean?
Technology definitely played a role in a lot of fronts.
Especially when you're trying to do, like you said, protected communications, somebody's either hand delivering something by somebody who's trusted, or you're doing secret code or something. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Morse code. So it's the chances of people being able to have faster access to information is minimal.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed part 3 of World War I, and hopefully we're not going to World War III at the moment with what's going on in the world. But this has just been eye-opening for sure in terms of the losses and the attrition, like they highlighted. Yeah, like they highlighted in this video, the attrition that was taking place of just constant humans that were being sacrificed for, unfortunate ideas. And like they said at the end there was no ceasefire or
not
any
even an attempt,
concession.
It seems like.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate because, we tend to repeat things and we don't learn the value of human life. So hopefully we're a little smarter moving forward. I guess we'll have to see how the rest of the war, though, plays out. We still got 1917, I think, coming next.
Yeah, I was going to say, we have a couple years to go, I believe.
Yeah, so make sure you stick around. It's a 9-part series. This will be part 3, so we got 6 more to go. So lots to get through still, lots more mind-blowing facts. And hopefully you guys are enjoying checking it. I am enjoying it. It's very informative, and it's just very eye-opening at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. Lots to process.
Yeah, so hopefully you guys are enjoying it. Make sure you hit the like button, and make sure you come back and check out our next part.
Thanks for watching, guys. See you then.